Keyboard clicks and echoes veins. City hum like distant rain. Cutting files and shifting lanes.
Hello, and welcome to the 11th Hour podcast. I am your host, Chris, and thank you very much for joining us tonight. If you've randomly clicked on this for whatever reason, just thought I'd, introduce what you're listening to. This is a sort of a video game podcast with a different twist. In my real life, I'm actually a certified public accountant, and I wanted to actually tackle some of these topics from a business perspective and just maybe from a little bit different lens than what you might see in a little bit of other video game podcasts. So hopefully you all like it. Hopefully you don't hate it. I do want to introduce my co-host, the person that you'll be listening to tonight, Mr. Khan. Say hi to
Hello,
everybody.
wonderful to be here.
How you
Can't
doing?
can't wait to start talking about the ridiculousness of the video game industry and how
Actually, I think
they
that's
will all go back to reading books again.
we're going about to inputs. And it's funny that you mentioned that. I think that's a big reason we started this too. Was I had this idea in the back of my head doing one, but then you're like, Chris, we gotta start shitting on modern video games.
Yeah.
So here we are. So, and I think it's a better place to start by talking about. Perhaps I think what most people kind of notice is that the flops of 2024. 2024 was an awful year for what I guess you call the AAA modern video game industry. Is a lot of these projects come out that you could call, I guess, had this typical diversity, equity, inclusion spin to them. Woke is the colloquial term, but they all kind of come out, and it only seems overdone now because how many of these games have come out, and how badly they've done. So I think what I want to do is review some of these catastrophic failures.
Flashback.
Flashback. And actually, I think it's a good way to start. So let's start with the first one that came out in 2024, which was Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. And this one was maybe this one doesn't fit the same category as the other ones, but basically to give you a recap, if you forgot about this game, rightfully so, I don't think most people played it. This was basically made by Monolith, I think that's the right company.
I
They're typically the guys who made the Batman Arkham games, which were well loved, critically
oh,
acclaimed.
absolutely amazing. Those are some of the best games for Batman.
So it's crazy that they made those games and then they come up with this turd, basically.
Jeez, what a I don't know. Was it the same studio with the same people?
Well, I think that's kind of the concern with a lot of these is that you'll typically see pictures of the before of after, and you'll see the guys who made the game you love, and it's just a bunch of dude bros. And then you see the game that looks after, and it looks like an HR department. And that's who makes the game that you hate. And this doesn't have the same talent. And what's crazy about this one too, thinking on it is this game was doubly, modern, AAA video game industry because not only was it, your typical woke girl boss kind of game with all the, slop in it, but it was also a live service game. And you know how we love live service games. So I guess before I could keep rambling, what do you think? What do you think, Con? What are your thoughts on Kill the
Well,
Justice League?
well, I honestly have completely forgotten about that game. It it came in swinging with a fist made of mud, and just a lot of people were not happy with it. They're like, "This isn't Batman."
I think that was the biggest concern too. Is this was one of Kevin Conroy's? I think it was until recently Kevin Conroy's last role, which I believe he was the Batman from the cartoons. So he's pretty famous, and I think a lot of things kind of made people upset was people felt that they did his character kind of dirty. He gets
Oh,
kind of just. I think the scene is to set it up is basically they kind of tie him into a chair and they kind of just almost unceremoniously just kill him. Like he doesn't really die
yeah.
and he
Oh, I
blames the
remember seeing
glory.
that.
It's very lame, very kind of millennial style. Saying
Yeah,
it sounds millennial, but
yeah. Fight the oppression. You'll believe
exactly.
how.
So it was just, and I think what also interesting about this game too is it came out in about January-ish time, and already they're killing the game. They killed Suicide Squad, killed the Suicide Squad. That's what I call
Suicide
it.
Squad committing suicide. They took the title too literally.
So I have an article here from Game Rants. Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League's upcoming season 4, episode 8 update will mark the final piece of new content to be added to the live service game. Once the new content arrives next year, Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League content will come to a close, marking the end of a very tumultuous and controversial chapter for what was supposed to be Warner Brother and Rocksteady's next big title. It's Rocksteady, and thank you, article, for reminding me who it was. So yeah, it's dead. I guess what else do you want to say about it, Con?
I just want to move on from that game, man. It was so bad. I tried to watch it a little bit. I tried to get into it, and it just I know this is a word that's coming back from the grave, but it wasn't fun.
You can't say that word. That's not we're not allowed to say that word anymore.
Let's say what
We
word.
have experiences. You have feelings.
Well, I have to say the only game, well, one of the
Mhm.
only games that I remember from last year that just was so abysmal, so pathetic, so grandiose would be Concord. That was
Actually,
that was the game that was just
speaking of which, that's the next game I have on my list to talk about. Is good old Concord.
I mean, it became its own nefarious word. Like, oh, is this a Concord game? It's so ugh, it was so bad. What did they spend 8 years?
Hmm.
Yeah, they spent 8 years working on the game, hundreds of millions of dollars,
Hmm.
and it lasted for 15 days.
It's impressive. It really is.
Oh my goodness gracious.
It's actually I have a funny story. Actually, I was listening to somebody else talk about it, and one of the things he was surprised because he's watching another review. Inception. I'm talking about someone that's talking about a review, and he mentioned he was like, "Oh, why does the footage look weird?" And it's like, "Oh, this wasn't a trailer or anything. This was somebody actually playing the game. It's probably almost impossible to find somebody actually playing this video game.
Wow, really?
It is just insane. It's one of those. And I have the Steam charts here too. In the end, it only about 600 people, not even 700 people tops, played the official release on. Now, in fairness, it's on Steam. There was obviously some people on PlayStation too, but this game got no traction. And going back to your costs, Con, do you want to guess how much this game cost to make in total?
Cord? Goodness. Last I remember it was like 200, 250 million. I don't know. It was something
Ooh,
ridiculous.
Sony probably
300
wishes it
million?
was 250, $400 million.
400. Oh my God.
Now, in fairness, it is an estimate. I don't think Sony's never came out and tell us how much they've actually burned on this game. Uh, but it sounds like, at least from insider sources, it seems like 400 million was the amount taken in this
What
game.
the hell? For the design of those characters? For the
I,
crappy gameplay? And it's a hero shooter, and you're gonna charge $40 for it? What the hell, man?
well, it's interesting about Hero Shooters. We'll talk about another one, obviously, because Marvel Rivals has been the game that's just done quite well.
Oh, I'm downloading it
Yeah.
now.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. That I got shit.
I'm on it
But
already.
it's just impressive too how bad some of those characters looked. I think the one that always stood out to me was the cat girl looking one. Because my thought is, okay, you know what? That's such a good archetype. You basically, Avatar's a very popular movie. Everybody loves the kind of animal hybrid girls, and it's just that character is so ugly and obnoxious. It's like, oh, come on, come on. It's like, oh my God, please shoot me. So it's interesting that this game is almost more famous for how bad it did and how awful it was and how nobody bought it than anything about the actual game. I wouldn't be surprised if most people even knew how the game had played, but I guess you get into hero shooter. It's one of those genres that we're kind of already tired of. So nobody's like that interested in being like, oh,
Well,
let's.
I don't think many people are tired of, you know, oh, playing the same game. And I'm talking about actual gamers, not uh,
Mhm.
tourists. Um, because you look at you can go to Steam database,
Hmm.
SteamDB, and you can look at some old games. There's still thousands and thousands of people playing it. Skyrim, one of the biggest ones probably still. It, it's not that people get bored. It's just that they get bored with bad games. They get
Right.
bored with bad gameplay. I mean, here, it's another hero shooter, 5v5. I think it's 5v5, Marvel
Hmm.
Rivals. It's doing amazing. Why? Because they took a genre and they said, we're going to make this genre our way, and we're going to make sure that people like to play it. We're going to
Hmm.
make everybody powerful, fun. We're not going to push any kind of political agenda on anybody. We're just going to make good stuff. We're going to try to stay true to what a hero is, the physical characteristics, um, the background of the character.
You mean by background, you mean their large assets, right? I'm sorry,
Their
their
large
assets. This is
oh,
the
their assets, yes.
this is PG-13. I don't know if the
Their
show's rated, but
yes, their large assets. Goodness gracious.
I
And
also.
yeah, so when you that part when people say, "Oh, people are tired of insert genre here," it's like, no, no, they're not. They're just waiting for the next fun one. Like, if you make a good Souls-like game, it's gonna sell. Everybody loves a good Souls game, you know?
Yeah,
Everyone wants
Tommy,
to
there's
roll and
this.
fight a boss, collect a loot. Everybody enjoys that stuff. But if you make it like clunky and limited, and no one's gonna play it. You gotta make it. You gotta make the people feel powerful.
Honest here talking about trying to convince you all to play a roll slop.
Hell yeah, do it.
Play
Avril,
all your delicious roll slop.
Havel's armor. Let's go.
So it's interesting as we kind of close out 2024, kind of close the book on Concord, say goodbye to it. I'm wondering if anyone's gonna remember this game in like 2 years. Is it just gonna be like a distant memory? We're gonna look back like a few years later, like, oh my god, that was a thing. Remember that? Remember that like awful disaster they released?
Remember COVID? Yeah, that was weird.
It's almost like that. Yeah, it's exactly
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
It does seem so strange. Like it was such a big thing, and it's like, actually, so I have one last game to talk about. This is one specifically, and that's Dragon Age. I think I want to say it's Vanguard. I
Yeah.
keep mixing this game's name up. I swear. I think it's Dragon Age Vanguard, and this one was one of the more successful ones. This one actually, if you look at the player count, it actually had some people playing it. And unlike Concord that never got above 700, this one had a peak 89,000 playing. But it kind of fell pretty quickly afterwards.
For a Dragon
Um,
Age game, that is so low.
yeah, and it's actually this to me it's and maybe you can tell me more because I've not been a big fan of the Dragon Age. It's kind of been one of those things I know people like BioWare, and it kind of came out towards the tail end of BioWare's like really good streak when they were releasing the early Mass Effect games. So I guess maybe tell me on some, and maybe for some of the viewers that know, like, give me really the lowdown. How big is Dragon Age? Like, how legendary of the series is this?
Well, the only reason I have familiarity with it is because I got oh, which one was it? I got one of them on sale and I played it. I was very impressed by the amount of detail in the story, the options you could have. The characters were brilliantly written. It was very enjoyable, but it's not my type of game that I usually play. Let me see, which one did I have? Yeah, I had Dragon Age Origins, and I was told that that's not even close to being one of the better games, I think. Let's see. Yeah, it was Origins that I played. I haven't beaten
Okay.
it still. But from what I saw, from what I played compared to what I saw for Vanguard, they were going in a little bit more of a uh third person hack and slash kind of direction. And I don't think that's what the fans really wanted. I think they still wanted their um RPG system, you know?
Yeah, and I'm not really sure. Here's what's crazy about this. I think it's how sometimes how much a lot of these changes really take the air out of the room.
Yeah.
Because I don't really know. It's one of those things you hear about them, you kind of mock them, but you don't really know a ton about the gameplay. And some of it's probably just that a lot of the gameplay is kind of generic and forgettable. Like, that's definitely true of Concord. Like, oh, here's a hero shooter. And that's true of Suicide Squad as well. But like with Vanguard, it's like the individual, it gets big enough to be like, well, here it's a long running series. To be like, well, here's all the unique individual changes. But I think almost the stupid shit like, oh, I'm coming out as a woman or whatever. He came out now that one character, or let's talk about doing a bar that scene. Oh my goodness! So it's just like all that stuff just takes like it's strange because it's a maybe it's not strange, but it's interesting. It defines the game. Like the game now becomes about this. And it doesn't matter how good the systems were or whatnot. It just now is like, no, you're this shitty woke game with this ugly character that's just going around and getting offended all the time. And that's why I kind of know the game. The character gets offended. It seems like the character gets offended all the time. So,
Goodness gracious. What was it this game where somebody they sat down and they took all the Dragon Age games
mhm.
and in the total number of the answer that you could use okay, it only came up like 60 times. But for Dragon Age Vanguard, the word okay came up 600 times, something like that, if I remember correctly.
Oh yeah, the I did
Very
see that.
weak writing, Again, that's what the Dragon Age games were known for. It was for the interacted interaction and choices you could make. And having okay reminds me of like Fallout 4, where it was like, you had four options and you only had two outcomes or something like that. Very disappointing. Very
Mhm.
lazy writing.
And that's one thing I do remember too. There was another big complaint with this game was the lack of RPG element. Is that obviously a lot of these games, a lot of Western games, you typically get a choice dialogue, what you can say, and it's definitely been true of the Bioware games. But it seemed like in this game you could never really disagree with your party members. It was kind of one of those games where you had like four different ways to say yes. Like you say yes defiantly, sarcastically, but you came to the same conclusion. So it kind of removed the role play element. And part of it is because he never wants you to say, you're retarded. The character is like, you're dumb, you're stupid, shut up. You can never really tell your party members off. You can't really role play your character. You're almost just kind of put on a track, and because the Dovar was never wants you to do that kind of thing. How dare you, insult our special snowflake characters? So it definitely just kind of like take and it's yeah, just what can I say? It's basically like it's not even really an RPG anymore. I guess it's in the typical American sense, Western sense.
Yeah.
I do have some numbers on this, and this one is interesting too. Going back, to, I guess why I didn't realize how big this game was. Um, from Game Rants, they mentioned that back in September 2024, Bioware executive producer Mark Duran said the Dragon Age Inquisition's lifetime sales were over 12 million. So, okay, that's pretty big, right? That's
Yeah.
at least notable. This game, at least now, this is rumored, and this again is how much do you trust YouTuber sources? Is but at least again from here from Smash AT, he mentioned that it is rumored to at least have broken a million, but that's not going to be enough to cover costs because
Oh,
again the
yeah.
problem is these games are so expensive now that even making a million, which used to be back in the day, back in only a few generations ago, a million was a massive success. You were
Yeah.
hugely successful, but now a million's like you need at least 5 million to really almost break even.
Goodness
So
gracious. Yeah, that
and
is that
and
that is some poor management.
it really is. I guess one of the two is like have people been? I guess the thought too is like how are people just sleeping at the wheel, just assuming that games are going to sell X number of copies just because like the slobbering masses will just buy whatever, even though it's
Yeah.
not at all true anymore. Not to
Goodness.
say you're all slobbering masses. You're listening to it. You're a beautiful, wonderful person, and I love you.
I think they're cutting back severely on people who are getting these jobs and not knowing exactly what they're doing beyond that of their progressive ideas. You know, I can see, teams sitting at a in a having a meeting and this one guy with pink hair is points out the lack of trans characters or something like that, and nobody in the room can say no really because then they get called out. That's how I feel. You know, that's probably what's going on, and they're slowly going to start not hiring those people. Slowly going to start cutting people out that are, you know, problematic in that regard, because you if you're a business, you got to serve the majority, and the majority says we don't like this crap.
So one of the things before we kind of move on from this topic, I definitely want to mention since you brought it up is, have you heard of the professor? Does this
Go
ring a
on,
bell at all?
go on.
So this person was somebody that worked in this. This is going back to Concord. Someone worked at the studio Firewalk. And I didn't mention this too. I forgot to mention this or thing. Firewalk, their only game was Concord. They've been shut down. Sony shut them
Oh,
down
wow.
last year, pretty much. And any hopes that the game was going to come back were pretty much squashed once they said, "No, we're done. Cut ties." They also killed another company like Neon Koi or whatever its name was. I didn't look it up very much. They basically made nothing either. They just literally bought a studio to shut it down. But this character, I think Lisa Brown is her name, but she basically her gimmick was that she went around and you had to call her professor. That was her shtick. And this was the point of the people behind Concord. So it does make me wonder, maybe, yeah, it'd be interesting to see if they are going to be screening more often. But I do know one thing they're doing, and that's getting rid of people. So to give you an idea, last this year, actually, let's take a guess. Con, how many people do you think were laid off of the video game industry in 2024?
Oh, goodness gracious. Oh, don't ask me that. I feel bad. I mean, these are people in their jobs, but
Yeah.
oh, I couldn't even give you a number. I know it's a lot, though.
Okay. I mean, it may seem like a lot, but it's actually 15,000 jobs were lost. And it may not seem like a big number, but this was a big number because I think believe last it was a record number of job losses. I believe the previous was, and I also note this is through October. I couldn't really find anything more recent, so it could be more. Um, but I think believe last year, 2023, it was closer to about 11 million. I'm sorry, 7,000. Jesus Christ.
Oh, well, oh,
So
jeez, scared me. I was like, what?
I
That's
know that'd be like that's a lot bigger than 15,000. So, but yeah, it definitely seems like there's definitely been some pullback due to kind of some of these bad games, to kind of these bad decisions being made. So kind of your point, it's just like, and obviously you don't like to see people like, lose their jobs because all these people do probably have families or,
yeah,
they have bills to pay and like, and
yeah,
it's a tough job market anyway. But at the same time, it's like, it's not an easy, you're an entertainment business. You got to make people like your stuff. So it's one of the sad truth is to some degree that you're not really gonna get tons of change until people start to feel that hurt a little bit. So it's one of those kind of like nest what do you call that? Um I guess growing pain. Growing pain might is the wrong word, but you get what I'm saying.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, so it's tough. So definitely think there's definitely some changes. I had one more point in time, but I want to ask you. I know there's a few other games we didn't really talk about. There was Dustborn, which just completely flopped, and
Oh, yeah,
that
that
one was worse. That was the one where you could yell cancel, and it was totally in the bag with the typical, diversity hires,
I
typical
thought
black
it was
female
more of
protagonist.
a joke game at first. Like, they made
Yeah,
this.
it's really on the nose, right?
I was like, this is real. Like, they really think like this. I was stunned. I want a list of
Yeah.
everyone who worked on that. I'm like, I don't want anything to do with these people.
Well, they may not work in the industry anymore given all these layoffs. They might just be all gone because the game did not do very well either. I don't really have Steam charts numbers here, but I think it did worse than Concord, and
Ugh.
Concord wasn't doing well. There was a Valid, I think, was the other one, which I don't even remember this game.
Did Avowed come out yet?
I thought it did, or maybe I'm thinking of another game. The something nine.
Oh, Unknown 9. Yeah,
Thank you. That was I think Namco Bandai's one, and that one just kind of came and went. I think.
yeah, they
I
were doing
think that one was.
a whole series and all these shows and podcasts and stuff. They had like a whole lineup. They were like, okay, this is going to be the new big thing. And it didn't. It's
Well,
gone.
what's great about all of these is that's how it was too. Again, going back to Concord and keep going back to Concord, but that one, same thing. It was in. I think what happened was there's Amazon had a show called Secret Level, which had a bunch of kind of showed up a bunch of games,
Yeah.
and one of them was there's a Concord episode. But the crazy part about it is Concord didn't even make it to that episode's airing.
Oh,
So Sony was.
I remember. No, it was of Concord, but it was of all the it was not of the current characters. It was a bunch
Mhm.
of other characters, which was probably going to be their second season introduction
Yeah.
characters. So they didn't
Didn't even get to those characters.
So
And
people still watching that, they're probably like, "Look at what we'll never get to experience."
spoiler alert, they were also really fucking ugly.
Uh,
We were not missing anything.
yeah.
I think maybe Sony spared us. They're like, you know what, you all suffered enough. We're closing Firewalk down, shutting this game down. So yeah, it's been a lot of it's definitely been a lot of flops this year. And we don't have information now for the year, but you know, the industry's kind of been declining post COVID, so it'll be interesting to see in future. Hopefully, if you watch future episodes, you should watch future episodes, by the way, that we might be talking about what the industry looked like in 2024. But the one thing I did want to mention to you, and this is maybe kind of a crazy take, but 2024, we also had the election of Donald Trump
Mm,
as our 47th president. But what's interesting about that and why I bring it up is because one of the big topics, even before the election and after, was one of the big reasons Kamala wasn't doing well. Is it was kind of talked about that the Democrats had lost young voters, and typically Democrats always young males, and typically Democrats always really do well with the young. That's just how it is. So I guess my question for you, Colin, is: do you think that they might clamp down on some of this kind of woke slash DEI slash whatever you want to call it HR approved games
well,
that
they're gonna have to start with getting rid of HR in that regard.
oh my gosh, oh we'd be all be better off.
Well, yeah, think about it. If you have competition and the
Hmm.
competition is a well-rendered booty, and your HR team says, "No, you have to cover up the girls."
It's
And you know
problematic,
it's not
Colin.
gonna work. You gotta get rid of them.
So yeah, I guess it's a thought then. Do you think there's going to be more in 2025? We're going to start to see more pushback. Our studio's going to be like, no, we do kind of want our characters to be attractive, and we don't really want this character who's trans or who's in a wheelchair or whatever goofy thing we come up with this time. A demi for diaper,
Easy.
diaper for. I
I
didn't
I
get to that. Thank God we didn't get there. So.
I think the entire industry has finally said, "You know what? This shit ain't working anymore. Let's go back to the old stuff." And they're just gonna I mean, we're seeing this even with like Facebook, for example, on like I know not
Hmm.
technically related, but a lot of industries are bending the knee towards the more conservative mindset and
Hmm.
away from the progressive ideals because they went I don't know why they even went with it in the first place.
Hmm.
And because they you can't keep losing money. You can't keep
Hmm.
losing and losing and losing. You got to change something.
Hmm.
So they're going to change their attitude, they're going to change their output, and I think they're going to try to just separate themselves from the past and say, "Okay, what do we got to do next? We need to make money." And that's just going to give give the people what they want.
I think it's pretty well said. I think we should time to close the book. We're going to close the book finally, shut it down for 2024's World Games. And now we're going to talk. We'll take a break, and we're going to talk. Come back, and we're going to talk about China and the Bing Bing Wahoo company, Nintendo. We got more to talk about there. Stay tuned. We'll be right back, everybody.
Coffee cups and empty chairs.
And welcome back. I must admit, Con, that commercial that we just saw, it made you cry, it made you laugh, it really made you feel. And that part about the
That
puppy,
Audi commercial makes me want to buy an Audi.
I really want to buy an Audi. Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you've been enjoying the show so far. As for the second half of our show, we got all this stuff about woke games. We don't talk about woke games anymore, and now we get to be man children, and we get to talk about Nintendo.
God,
Bing bing wahoos.
it's so bad, dude.
So talk to I guess what do you want to start? We can try to start with
I
actually no
want to
let's start with
start with this. I want to start with the Switch too.
let's start with the Switch 2. Okay, let's start with the Switch 2. Okay, so if you've been living under a rock, basically the Switch 2 has pretty much just leaked. Nintendo has officially said they would announce the Switch 2 by the end of their fiscal year, which is March 31st, 2025. So this year. But everyone said, you know what, Nintendo? Nah, we ain't doing that. We ain't doing that. So several retailers have leaked the Switch 2, and a lot of this is related to like some of it's the typical Chinese manufacturer leaking, and some of it's just honestly just accessory manufacturers, like the people that make all the accessories for the Switch 2, and they've just kind of decided to open the floodgates. So,
Did they
and I
not?
just
I'm looking at the picture again that you sent
yeah,
me
yeah.
about the leak of this. So it's just a slightly bigger Switch. Maybe it's got a little bit more kick in it. But
Hmm.
I swear, I'm looking at this. Do they not know that the market that they're entering right now, this is a repeat of the Wii U? This is just
We don't speak those words. We don't speak that evil here.
like, what are they holding on to?
Well, the hope is, with Nintendo is they're holding on to some, like, top tier legendary games. But talking about the Wii U too, this is an interesting kind of point to bring up before I get too much into the system. Is historically Nintendo kind of goes through this boom and bust cycle where they'll have a really big
Yeah,
success and then kind of a failure. And that was very true of both the Wii U and the 3DS. Is that
yeah,
Nintendo had the highs of the Wii and the DS, and then the Wii U sold like only 10 million, 13 million, and the
yeah.
3DS sold about half of the DS's sales.
Wow,
And
yeah,
now we went back. We have the success of the Switch. Almost might be one of the best selling systems when everything's said and done. It's really close. It's behind the PS2, I think, and still at DS.
yeah,
But now, we're going to the next generation, and we're basically just kind of doing Switch again. It seems like.
yeah. It's mind-boggling to me that, and I really think, unless their marketing team can come up with something, because they're stuck in this console, their own console,
Hmm.
they can only sell that many
Right.
games
Hmm.
that of how many consoles so they're solely reliant on console sales, pretty
Hmm.
much. So if if this is, which I think it will be, 2025, and the Switch 2 will
Hmm.
be a flop for them, as you said, they have their on and off seasons. This will be an
Hmm.
off season. They're not going to sell as many. That means whatever game lineups they have coming are not going to sell.
Well, I think the hope too is that that's kind of the Nintendo's unique thing is unlike the other company, the competition, Sony and Microsoft, is that they try to use the software to get you by the hardware. And in fairness, even if they sell less, there's a benefit to them because if they sell on other platforms, they have to pay. Usually, you pay about 30% to the platform holder. So
Yeah,
obviously, Nintendo gets to keep that 30% for themselves. But yeah, it's kind of dependent. If they don't really knock it out of the park with some like massive success, then it's kind of just not going to really do that well. And then
yeah,
and the problem is you kind of are stuck with this. I think people forget that Switch was really successful early on, so it's carried on that success. So it's not like Nintendo's making great decisions now or even the last few years. They made a great decision in 2017, 2018, maybe 2019, and now they're just kind of riding that coast net success
yeah,
and again, it's not even the same leadership. The president of Nintendo was the Furcall is the current president of Nintendo. He wasn't president when Switch launched, so it's like okay, we even have a new guy
yeah, yeah.
in charge. It's like, ooh, is he? This is the real testing ground would be the system.
Want to come back to
Just
something you said at the beginning
yeah,
of
yeah,
this,
hmm,
about software and hardware and what their selling point is with that.
yeah,
So I think people are also losing trust in Nintendo because
hmm,
every time they introduce something that people like, they end up taking it away or shutting it down so you can never get access to it again, you
yeah,
know? So I wonder if people are going to look at this and say, "Okay, I have my Switch. I don't really need 1440p or whatever they're going to say is going to, be better.
hmm.
I just want the games for what I have now." I wonder if they're gonna. I don't know what's on the Switch. I don't have one. I don't play. I emulate, if anything.
Oh
Um,
no, we don't speak those words. Oh, that's not
oh
a thing.
no, no, no! Can't do that.
You cannot do that. That does not exist today. You cannot emulate. What is this such a silly notion? Why would you say such a thing?
I hear an Italian knocking at my door. What is that? Is that Luigi?
Oh no.
Oh no!
Oh well,
Uh,
thankfully we don't sell insurance. I think you're okay.
yeah. I wonder if they're gonna remove. I don't know. Do they have a Switch store?
Yes, there is a Switch specific eShop. And Nintendo has shut down the other eShops or whatever you call them, Nintendo stores, we'll call them
Yeah,
Nintendo stores,
yeah,
for their other systems. Like the Wii's been shut down. I think the Wii U and the 3DS are also shut down. So it's really just the current, which is strange too, only because it's like it doesn't cost that much money to run these things.
yeah.
But whatever, it's something they do. So it's yeah, and I guess and the one thing I will say, so come some of the features that they have confirmed, at least Nintendo officially themselves confirmed, the Switch 2 is backwards compatible, which I guess was kind of a given. It kind of needed to be.
Yeah.
Um, as far as the other features of the system, at least the kind of what we get is there's a whole discussion on power. I'm not going to get to it because I'm not smart enough to talk about it or technical enough. But it seems like it's probably about as strong as a PS4, which it's probably about right. Um, the Joy Cons they seem to maybe have a magnetic that's kind of been talked about. It seems to be the case. I'm not 100% sure. The only other thing that seems unique that's come out about it is that the Joy Cons have a little infrared at the bottom of them, so they can be used like a mouse. So it seems like
Oh,
they
okay.
might. That's the one unique feature of them.
That's pretty
So
cool. Okay.
that one we'll have to see again. Nintendo will have to sell a game on it. And sometimes with these only problem with these gimmicks, I think the reason, and at least I've been this way. I'm not sure if anybody else is this way. Is that I've never loved them because it seems like what Nintendo do, they'll come with a gimmick, it seems novel, and then they'll never do anything with it. They'll make a mini game compilation and like, oh look how great this is, and then that was it. Like even those the Joy Cons had that problem. They had this kind of unique motion, and outside of I think one two switch and arms, they never use them.
That's
They,
right. Yeah. They
which
just come
I
up with selling points that they never want to like follow up with.
uh arms two needs to come out on the Switch too.
Yeah.
Arms is underrated. So I like my goofy
It was
arms game.
fun. As little as I played of it, it was really, really fun. It's just you can't play it on anything else.
Yeah, exactly. And that's
No.
goes to another thought too, is that I think we're in so the industry has definitely changed in one big way. It's just that right now Sony and Microsoft have basically decided that they're gonna release their stuff on their platforms. Microsoft's done everything, but Sony at least is also on Steam.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a hard part for Nintendo. Nintendo's always remained on their platform. That's kind of how they work, is they very much rely on the software to push the hardware. But Nintendo didn't do if Nintendo doesn't do really well, if we do have another flop on our hands, is there going to be some pressure? And you might laugh, you might say, "Oh, Nintendo will never do that." But investors were big on pushing Nintendo into mobile.
Yeah.
Nintendo would never, you thought Nintendo would never put their stuff on another platform. Well, investors weren't happy the 3DS wasn't selling well. Iwata capitulated, and they started making games on mobile. And they pretty much did that up until I think the Switch 2 and COVID did so well, they can kind of just say, "Oh, we're not doing that anymore."
Yeah.
But that's kind of the thing. Is I guess my question for you, Con, is do you think are they going to bend the knee to Lord Gaben? Are we going to
They
have our games on Switch
they will.
or on Steam? I mean,
Yeah, we're gonna have Nintendo games on Steam this year, I think.
you think this year? That's
I
aggressive. I don't think this year.
this year. 'Cause well,
Uh,
when is Switch 2 gonna be released?
Probably. Well, I don't know. There's no date. The only rumor has been there's so many rumors. April seems to be the current one, which seems kind of quick actually.
Yeah, it
So
seems really fast.
that's what's weird about this whole thing too, about this whole announcement situation is that it seems like again if we're gearing up for accessories, this is coming kind of soon. So it seems strange that Nintendo hasn't talked about it. It seems like they probably should have already said something already about this. That's probably why these leaks also seem crazy too. It's like, well,
Yeah.
everyone's kind of like, well, where is it? You told us you told us it was gonna be. We can announce our stuff because it's coming out soon. So,
I'm gonna be
which by the
bold.
way,
I'm gonna be bold. I'm gonna say
yeah, yeah.
after the Switch 2 releases,
Hmm.
I'm gonna give it I'll give Nintendo October, November. I'll give Nintendo 8 months. And within it sometime within that eighth month time frame, you're probably gonna see something popping up on Steam.
I'm gonna say 2 years is my thought. And again,
Oh,
obviously, this
wow.
is predicated on the system not doing very well. I think if
Yeah,
it still has 3DS levels, there'll be some talk about that. I think the pressure is going to be from the fact that Sony and Microsoft already do this, so
yeah,
it's almost becoming an industry norm. And every other company is doing this too. That's the other problem too that makes it hard for Nintendo is that PC is becoming the default for
yeah,
everything. And that's what developers are using to make their game first on PC. And if you see it too, like the numbers don't lie. PC they do better. I think Helldivers, which was Sony is one of their other successes. I think about 80% of the players for Helldivers 2 were on Steam, not on PlayStation 5. Or yeah, we're on 5, I think, right?
yeah. PC is
Oh my god, we getting old.
the majority market for most things.
Yeah, so that's kinda and even even Japan, I don't really have this in front of me, but,
Yeah,
Japan, I think it's about 20% of the market now. It used to be almost nothing. It used to be basically a non-factor, but
yeah,
now it's sizable, and that's a lot of thanks to VTubers. And just because it's so much easier for them to play PC games than other systems.
yeah, yeah.
So that's it. I think there's a real risk there.
We're
Um,
moving into the Gaben monopoly.
Gaben always he wins. He always wins. He just he's just gonna chill out in New Zealand one day and he gets the phone call, the depressing phone call. For you, it was the worst day of your life. For him, it was Tuesday. Taco Tuesday for Gaben. Uh, and the other thing too, and talking about there isn't really much else to talk about with Nintendo. Their 2024 was kind of uneventful. Really, they had a few games. None of them were really spectacular. I think the new Zelda game was pretty awful. I actually did not like that game. Um, so kind of all they did is they released Alarmo, which is the greatest invention ever.
Not this again.
We recorded a podcast that never got released for various reasons, but there was a conversation about Alarmo, and these guys did not know what Alarmo was, and they're like, "What?
I
What?"
wish I wish I still didn't know what it was.
Actually, I'm surprised any of them actually have sold because nobody talks about this device anymore. They literally announced it, and it was like, "Oh, this is a dumb Nintendo thing," and then never again. It just kind of exists. But yes, and if you don't know what Alarmo is, it's basically just a Nintendo alarm clock, and it makes annoying Mario coin sounds. That's its gimmick.
And it's
So
$100.
it's $100, and they're suing. They're suing kind of just everyone, which I don't know what's wrong with them. They're kind of just suing a bunch of these. And that's actually the other thing too. The problem with I think the other drive with PC is that emulation is just getting so much better. It's hard to and one of the sad truths is PC just offers a better experience even for Switch games because again your Switch can run given emulator issues aside, but you can run your Switch games like 60 FPS. You can't do that on the actual Switch. You're gonna have to do it on your PC. So I think that's the other thing too. That's kind of like where there's some tumultuous. I don't know if Nintendo's doing it because they just hate emulation or because they are actually worried about the Gaben's future, Lord Gaben's monopoly. But I guess before we move on, what do you think about Nintendo's lawsuits?
I guess they're obligated
Hmm.
because as soon as they let one thing go, everyone's gonna jump on it.
Hmm.
You know, there's so many diehard fans, but the fandom continues for most games through them. I
Hmm.
don't, I hope I'm saying that right.
I think so. Yeah.
But Nintendo, they really, really, really want to keep their doors closed to everything that they possibly can. They don't want to be. They want their monopoly on the mustached man.
The mustache
like
man.
like
Which mustache man we talking
yeah.
about?
Recently, I played a game called Pseudo Regalia,
Hmm.
and it's a platformer. But my goodness gracious, it is so smooth.
Hmm.
You can tell that the guy has played a bunch of Metroidvania and has some inspiration from Mario with a lot of the
Hmm.
movement in the game. I want to see more of that. Everyone loved Nintendo 64's Mario 64 because it was so fluid. They caught something really good there.
Hmm.
And I never really felt that in any of the other Mario games. You know?
You can bring that up too, because one of the other big kind of news items from 2024 was you've heard of Astrobot. I think that's the name of the game,
Oh yeah, yeah. Astrobot, yeah.
which is it's interesting mostly because it's basically just Super Mario 3D World with PlayStation robot basically. But it's award wise is one insane number of awards was it's game of the year according to if you trust the Game Awards they gave it game of the year. A bunch of other outlets did too. So clearly people that kind of gameplay resonates with people.
I
So
I I still have my doubts about the legitimacy of it being game of the year though. Not because it's a bad game.
mhm,
I watched a lot of gameplay because I was very curious about it. I
mhm,
didn't really pay attention to it at all, and it was only on the PlayStation. So,
mhm,
and people who play on PlayStation don't really play cutesy games like that.
mhm,
So, and it was very well, it felt like a big advertisement game, like, hey, look, we have you can fly the controller you're playing with in space. It's like it's got that cutesy
Mhm.
it's like the kind of game that comes out with a new console to market the console.
Yeah.
And and as in, enjoyable as it was to watch, and probably I might play it one day. I I don't know. I feel like there was some shenanigans with that being game of the year.
A little bit. I think people feel that way for sure, only because it doesn't seem that remarkable. It's kind of a bit of a side topic, but like it doesn't seem like it was like that amazing. It seemed like it was a good game, and I think people liked it because I think they're hungry for those kind of games on from Sony, and I 100% get that. But it did feel like a little bit like it did feel like they got paid a little bit because it's just like there was a lot better games I would say that came out in 2024 than Astrobot. I
Yeah,
wouldn't put Astrobot as even the top five.
yeah.
And I'm sure you wouldn't either. So it's kind of like, why are we doing this game? So that might be a topic. Actually, one of these days, I do want to shit on the Game Awards because I absolutely hate the Game Awards. So
Everybody does. We just watch it
I,
for entertainment.
yeah,
Nobody.
it's just you hate watch it. You just hate watch it. Actually, that kind of lets me tie it into the next segment. So we have to talk about China. And starting off with the Game Awards too. So the Game Awards has a section called the Player's Voice. And that is the one section where there's a lot of um watcher input basically. Like basically there's no journalist opinion. It's just basically whatever people vote on.
Yeah, the
And it's
consumer.
had
Yeah, the
yeah, it's
player.
had some pretty interesting results. This year it was interesting for one specific reason. I'm gonna list you off the five that were the five finalists, and you can tell me if you see a commonality between them. First one's Black Myth Wukong, Genshin Impact, Elden Ring Shadow of the Earth Tree, Withering Waves, and Zenless Zone Zero. Do you see a pattern here?
I see. I see a lot of Eastern influence. A lot of.
It's just so yeah. So if you didn't know, Shadow of the Earth Tree is the
Wait,
only
it was only
non-Chinese game on that list.
those were the only five nominated.
No. So how it works to give you there's like three rounds of voting. So the pool shrinks down to five.
Oh, so this is purely the people speaking.
Yeah, so and there
Okay,
were more
okay.
games. Like I think Power World made it to round two and they got kicked out. I think Shadow had gotten somewhat far too.
I
But basically, it people whittle it down. So these were not the only five games they could vote on. These were
okay.
just the five that got to the last round of voting. And then
Yeah,
Black Myth Wukong was the one that won, which isn't surprising. It won the Steam Award too. I think people really did like that game. Again, actually going back, you talked about Souls earlier in this podcast. People really like it. There you go, Black Myth Wukong. People clearly like that game.
I think
So
it's amazing, and it speaks for itself that a DLC made it to Game of the Year, or nominated for Game of the Year because it's so dang good. Elden Ring.
I'm gonna say that maybe controversial or not. I do think Genshin and Elden Ring had no business be on this list. I just like, come on, guys.
Genshin, I think is just the fans. I think it's just a lot of the fans, pushed it, and from what I understand, if they win something, they reward. They're paying people
Yes,
off.
there
So
is
I
some
don't.
degree of that. All of these, I think the three gotcha games on here, which are Genshin Impact, Withering Waves, and Zenless Zone Zero. A lot of times they do that. They'll give like awards if they will. In fairness, they will give awards if they're also just nominated. They'll give out the freebies anyway. So a lot of times it doesn't matter that much. But what's interesting about this, and it makes it interesting, is I wonder too, is that there's concerns that is China just flooding this? Because obviously there's so many Chinese that they can
Yeah,
totally dominate this.
yeah.
They can easily dominate this. And there's a story about too, and I won't get too much into it, but in 2020 there was a big fight between Genshin and Sonic Frontiers. And
Wait,
Genshin ended up
what?
winning just because the Chinese got pissed at them and they could outvote them. And that's what happened.
Oh, what? I didn't know
You never
that.
heard this? You never heard this
No,
story? Is a
this
I'll have
is.
to say this story for one time. It's a hilarious story, but basically the gist of it, you all should look it up. There's some really great videos on it. Basically, Sonic Frontiers, they had pushed it into the final round, but the Sonic fans were making fun of Genshin. They were like really shitting on it, and the Chinese player base didn't like that, and they
Poke
found out
the
about it.
bear. They poked the bear, didn't
And and the Genshin Impact player base is huge, but there's so many Chinese players. It's mostly big in China, but and they just flooded it. So it's interesting. Again, it shouldn't have been there. It was more funny that time. It would
That's
have been funny if it won this time, but no, it shouldn't have been on the list at all. Let's be real
it
with
shouldn't
ourselves.
be on the list. No.
So, and that's another thing too. It kind of want to bring me to talking about um Black Myth Wukong, because this game actually was a massive success. It probably was one of the biggest successes of 2024. And so according to here game ranks, I have it here. Black Myth Wukong dev reportedly exceeds 1 billion in revenue on Steam. And by the way, I actually should say it's just on Steam. This game I think was also released for PlayStation 5. So to give you an idea. And it
Well,
was one of the fastest selling games of all time. Not beating Grand Theft Auto 5, which has the title still, but that's kind of a lot for what you would think this game wouldn't have been that big.
it's a Souls-like with a strongly uh, loved character and story. So yeah,
I have your link in the article. Black Myth Wukong sold over 18 million copies within 2 weeks after launch, and the
wow,
game surpassed 20 million copies sold within the first month of launch. I think the only other games that really did that kind of those kind of numbers were Power World did really well in 2024. We forget it because it came out in fucking January.
yeah,
And then Helldivers did too, which also came out in February.
yeah,
So this is, you don't think about this. This is one of the most successful games of the year. But the reason why I bring it up, and I think this is something that hasn't really been talked about, is that China, people forget, is a massive country. It's a country of 1 billion people, and it's not as well off as say Korea or Japan are, or even some Western countries. But it's so successful enough that it has at least some kind of a middle class,
yeah.
and clearly they can buy a lot of games. And one thing I wonder too is, are we going to see China just begin to dominate the game industry more as they kind of move away from, say, your typical gotcha model to a more traditional game model? Because they definitely have been moving up and up and up and up and up. I mean, Genshin Impact was kind of the first, I would say, the first AAA gotcha game, and it came out in 2020, and since then they've releasing more games. And now after this game was super successful, I don't have the numbers here. I believe the Chinese Communist Party approved a lot more games at this game's success because they started to see like, oh, this is a real market. We can really actually make, money here and get some maybe some cultural influence too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the East has this in the bag. I think they're gonna pick up the slack that the West is severely dropped.
And speaking of the West really dropped, remember a little game you talked about on the show called Marvel Rivals?
Ooh.
Also made by a Chinese developer, NetEase Games.
Yep.
Peak player count, 437,000. Which is obviously way more than a lot of these other games. And I don't have it here, but Overwatch has been taking a little bit of a beating too.
Yeah. Wow.
Kind of been going down. So it definitely seems like China is starting to kind of come in their own.
Well, I was stunned just recently with the release of not one, not two, not three, but
Mhm.
four new characters that they just dropped. The Fantastic Four.
Yeah, they did this really fast too, actually. And I will say I don't really play it, but I like what they did with Mr. Fantastic. I like that his gimmick is just like doing like the Luffy arms and One Piece
Oh,
arms,
oh yeah,
just throwing hands at people.
the millennials and the Zoomers are butting heads over that stuff.
Oh, because it's always like my favorite anime, even though Mr.
Of
Fantastic is way
course.
older than Luffy.
It's like he came out way before your stupid anime came out, and it keeps going on. I think I scroll through there sometimes. It's very entertaining to read that.
People have way too much time on their hands. I guess it's important. I guess it's very the important day. But I guess what do you think about I know you talked a little bit about this, but let's talk a little bit more about Marvel Rivals. What do you think about Marvel Rivals now? Basically, kind of almost seems like they might be the de facto hero shooter. They seem they may be taking the title from Overwatch.
Well, yeah, they're taking the title from Overwatch because Overwatch doesn't exist.
Hmm.
Overwatch 2 does, and now from what I hear, they made Overwatch Classic because they're trying to get players back
Con.
again. Huh?
Oh, I was just kind of recruiting. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. No. It's cool. It's cool. I thought you were gonna say something. But yeah, so nobody really plays Overwatch. Everyone plays Overwatch 2, but nobody wants to play Overwatch 2, and it's on Steam now of all places.
Hmm.
So I think yeah, I think it's gonna be taking over, and I think Valve is gonna drop their hero shooter. Although it's a little bit more different than everything else.
Oh, yeah, Deadlock. That one I think is more of a MOBA, like a more of a traditional MOBA.
Yeah, it's like a MOBA mixed with a team shooter. So
Mm.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, we'll
interesting.
see what happens.
It's interesting that one's in alpha still, so that one could change quite a lot before release. So it could become more like these games.
Yeah,
They
but
could just say we're going to make it a hero shooter for realsies.
I think Marvel Rivals is more marketable, m- much more. Much. It's better designed. Overwatch came in, it had a huge impact, and it gave everybody one. It was fun. It was really fun in
Hmm.
the beginning, and then they slowly started to get invaded by all these ideas and
Hmm.
this like you can't be five tracers anymore, everyone has to pick a different character. They took all the fun away.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say this, I think Blizzard sees this, and I think they're going to start beefing up Heroes of the Storm. I think we're going to see a return of the dead game.
On you would not know how much I love it. I got I don't want to say it. Since this is PG-13. I was making a really crude joke, but no, I love everything you're saying. They need to bring back our dead games to 2020. 2025 is the year to Heroes of the Storm,
Yeah, here we go.
and they take back the mobile market.
Yeah.
The king will reclaim his crowd. Probably not, but whatever. One can hope. That's my hope. Actually, you know what? So here's the that's a good way to kind of think about it. Before we close out the podcast, Con, do you since kind of this is really our first episode, but this is the first episode of 2025. What do you think is going to happen in the game industry? What will we be talking about in December? Do you think?
Well, just like we've been talking about last year's Concord fiasco, I think we're going to
Hmm.
be talking about the Assassin's Creed fiasco for a while.
You know, I forgot that game hasn't come out yet.
It doesn't need to come out. It won't. It ain't coming out.
You don't think it's coming out?
It's gonna peek out of its closet and close the door.
God. That's, by the way, one of the things I do want to talk about. I'm desperate to talk about is Ubisoft, because oh my god, that company is gone. Oof. I think I will say my prediction. If you try and jump in, I think Ubisoft's either gonna get sold off or enter bankruptcy in 2025.
Yeah, they're either way, Ubisoft's done. They're never coming
Yeah.
back. They're going. What did I say? I posted up online.
Mhm.
They're coming in for a Ubi hard landing.
God, Jesus Christ.
So bad.
What am I? I can't take you anywhere.
Yeah, but I foresee a lot more fun coming from China.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're gonna be introducing a few more surprises this year, and a lot of people are just gonna enjoy themselves. And the indie frontier is gonna blow up even more. Balatro, for example, was one of
Mm-hmm.
the best games that nobody heard of, and now everybody's playing it. It's very, very well done.
Which, by the way, a lot of people wanted to crap on Balatro for they got nominated for Game of the Year too. Honestly, I know what wasn't even my top one for Game of the Year. It deserved to be on there. It was a great game. Balatro
It,
was a fun
yeah,
game.
it is very fun.
Indie games can be Game of the Year too. I don't know why we have the stigma that they can't be. I don't know.
Well, the assumption is, unless you pay your fee, you're not making it up into the
Yeah,
echelon.
you gotta have the marketing budget. So it'll be interesting to see. Exciting year coming up. Any last thoughts for UConn?
I'm just thinking about invisible girls and their butts.
We can't see it. She's invisible. Ah,
Uh,
duh. I'm just thinking, you know what? 2025 is the year to hear the storm comes back.
it's gonna be a
That's
fantastic,
it's gonna be a great year.
fantastic year.
Thank you everybody for watching. Hope you have a wonderful evening. Thank you for joining us at the 11th hour, and I hope you have a great rest of your evening. Take care, everybody.
Peace, everyone.